A lot of times people are forget about what that racial dynamic looks like, and I don't know which decade this is in, but what I'm hearing is this white man with wealth is met by this black man in his store with no wealth, who's
Mm-hmm.
coming to his store. He sees a prodigy in him. Historically, what magical white men are coming down to give black men things without
Mm-hmm.
asking for something in return? A lot of black men have not made it home over that promise. A lot of black men haven't made it home over the promise of white women walking on the right side of the street with them. Like that is something as a director I would bring into this equation. And not that it has to be about race and it has to be about the negative history, but at the end of the day, a lot of times I talk about what it means to weaponize, about the fact that our bodies are weaponized. So, a lot of times you'll be in a show where it's colorblind casting. James, can speak, and I can just pick a vernacular and just go with it. It's not really race specific. But when you see a white man and a young black man on a stage together, that is, when you think about what that looks like, it's the same programming you get when you watch television and you see a young man with his pants hanging down and a hoodie on his head, which is why I refuse to take those roles. It's programming. That's a thug. These are the same thugs, this is the same young men who are dying on the streets right now.
Right.
So when I think about directing through an equity lens, we have to bring all of that. I like to bring all of that data into the circle, all of it. On top of the fact, I like to have a check-in before every rehearsal and see what we're bringing into the space today. So maybe some parts of the script are a little closer to the actor than they would want it to be, or we need to take some time to think about what intimacy looks like with some of the topics that comes up in a show like that. So I just like to know what actors are going throughout the day. And for me, that's working through an equity lens, thinking about what our actors bring into the space from their personal lives, thinking about how we're telling stories for the community, the society that if you look at the world right now, just creating some space for that. And maybe we need it, maybe we don't. But if we put it all in the room, we can take out what we don't need and hopefully tell a story. So not a lot of directors really think about it from that perspective. That I've worked with this type of stuff.
Yeah. What you're saying also, taking back to my narration practice, it sounds like perhaps there is a hierarchy in terms of the amount of attention that I give to a particular accent, because of course, there's lots of variation within the white experience as well, and white people within the United States. And it's funny, isn't it, how actually I would see all kinds of varieties of white folks, but I would, think, okay, and then there's black, right? And I don't think about, my first response is, oh, okay, then there's black, and that's just that voice, that thing, but when I'm doing different voices and I'm doing different accents, and in terms of bringing myself to those voices and those accents, I'm already there to a certain extent, because I carry the white experience, or I carry a white experience. So there's a lot of me already in those characters that I'm bringing to the table with the voices. However, when it comes to BIPOC, that is something where it's like, oh yeah, no, it might be good for me to reach back and actually see what are the experiences that these people are bringing into the scene, because that's not the water that I swim in. That's not necessarily the me that I'd be bringing to those characters. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And then you use the term BIPOC, and if you really think about it, BIPOC, Black Indigenous persons of color. So like, how many Indigenous plays have we seen lately? And how many Asian theater companies do we? And not just, and I'm saying Asian theater companies, but like, Japanese culture is one thing. Chinese culture is a different thing. Like, like we really think about these multi-layered cultures. And nothing against you. This is literally happening across the country.
Sure.
Oh, we're doing BIPOC theater. I was like, what does that mean? That encompasses everything that's not white. So,
right.
And that when you think about that, we don't get a lot of opportunities to tell our own stories. Some of the best education I ever had was working at Passanart. Passanart, the theater company, is a Black theater company that's been running in Portland for over 30 years. And it's literally about passing the art from one generation to another. It's their mission statement. And when I did Two Trains Running a couple of years ago, that was one of the most wholesome experience. Bill Ray directed it. Rick Jones is in the cast. J.P. Phillips, Cicely Ash, and Ken Dimbo. And I'm the young buck in the room with men who literally grew up and knew August Wilson, you know, in this Black grand organization. And so when you're in a room full with just Black folks telling stories and really immersing ourselves in all this history, it just comes out of us. There's a music that happens with it, you know, and it's such a genuine experience.
Now let's say here's one thing that was that I've been thinking about, which is, let's say that there's a character in a book. Now, in the books that I've narrated so far, I can't think of one that has had an African American Black character, except for a spy thriller I did much earlier in my career. And sometimes as I'm reading these books, I think, well, you know, the author and I have agreed that, you know, with the cop, the firefighter, the taxi driver, the doctor, you know, it's one of my authors says it's dealer's choice. You know, you just do whatever you want with it. And my thought was like, well, for goodness sake, maybe I shouldn't, you know, I should stir some color into this, you know, maybe I should, you know, why can't the doctor be Black? Okay, I'll do that voice.
What does that voice look like?
Yeah, and is it really my place to do that voice?
I would say no. I mean, honestly, a Black doctor can speak a gazillion different ways.
Right.
And picking any perceived Black vernacular in that instance really makes a really tight box for you've made the decision for them. Because a lot of I don't think anyone would ask me for a specific vernacular with that. But what happens if you've got a doctor that doesn't speak the most educated English but is a brilliant doctor? Is that something that works? Like. Are you expecting them to be more educated and be more articulate? And I mean, that's stuff that Black folks make fun of me for. It's like, you talk like you're white. I've been told I talk like I'm white. That is a cultural thing. And I'm like, well, what does white look like? You know, is it a Black man who's educated and went to school? And is that what talking white looks like? Because if that's what we're equating it to, that's literally what we bring into this type of work when we think about how we want to represent this person. How do we want to be represented? What do we want kids at home that look like us to get from us if we've got the choice to do that? I would love to do a role like that and then just really see how far I could take that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So basically, if it's a character that isn't, no pun intended, fleshed out, you know, it probably is better to simply go with, again, what Matt brings to the character, as opposed to imposing a very obvious racial stereotype for the sake of diversifying the group in there. Does that sound right?
Correct. And then the other thing about it is, you know, what exactly is it about this character? Why is this character Black? So, you know, the actor and director in me is saying, well, why would the playwright or script or a film writer make this? Why is this character Black? What's so Black about this character? Am I just simply Black? Is there something Black culturally with the character that happens? Is it with the speech? Are you assuming it's where he lives? Or, you know what I mean? Being Black for Black's sake it doesn't always pan out that way. Unless we're in an environment where he's a Black doctor, but he's got that one white doctor who's always asking him a couple more questions than the other doctors with just as much experience than him. And that happens to us a lot, where people for me, that becomes that becomes a writer's choice to make that character a bit of an antagonist, and that makes perfect sense because I don't know a single Black person that's had a successful career that can't tell you about the amount of stress they go to just trying to get up in the world. I mean, thinking about that makes complete sense for me for this doctor. People are always microanalyzing what you're doing, or being surprised that you're doing so well, or making barriers for you in your career. And I think that would be a good choice. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, and honestly, in the book, it's just simply, he looked at the doctor, and the doctor, you know, looked back and said, "I've got some bad news for you," you know, and then suddenly a bomb went off in the hospital, and he was, you know, blah 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 blah. You know, that could be the doctor's one line, right, for the doctor character in the book.
Right. Oh, got it.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, in that case, I would probably adopt something that sounds unapologetically Black.
Yeah.
So
yeah, really,
but that's me.
You would, but do you think it's but it's probably not a good idea for a white narrator to just slap on a, you know.
No. No, unless, I mean, but you know, at the end of the day, I believe in, you know, this is a collaborative art form. If that is something that you want, I think you should be prepared to explain why. Like, what I want, this needs to be Black. Well, why does it need to be Black? And I'm going to ask you that question. And if you don't have an answer for me, I'm like, well, what is it for? You know, that in itself is problematic. That is part of that, creating through an equity lens, just asking the questions why. I like to have an answer for everything. Why is there bright yellow? All I see is a bright yellow dress on the stage, and I can't keep my eyes off of it. What is it there for? It's gotta serve a purpose, or we're just Black for Black's sake. You know, there's so many other things we can do with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's again with the video series. That's the you know, that's the question I need to ask myself, and probably even explain more clearly in the tag on the video. You know, it's not necessarily a video that I am going to go in and edit, but in terms of the description below the video, it's like, okay, what is the purpose of this? You know, what am I doing here? You know,
exactly. And when we talked about it, like I don't think you should necessarily just take it down for just because I say that it doesn't feel right. I mean, can you explain? You're able to explain why you're doing it. Are you able to answer the tough questions? If someone Black comes along and says, "Hey, why'd you do that? Can we talk about it?" Are you prepared to answer those questions and not necessarily defend your work? Because I know it's not about talent. It's about why. It's about the why. Because personally, I don't watch anything that has Blackface in it. I don't like listening to white people talk in a Black vernacular unless it's a character choice and it's a clear one and it serves a purpose. Right. Otherwise, you've taken me somewhere I don't want to be, and you've taken me there without a destination, and it feels wrong. It just feels wrong. It just feels wrong inside, you know. But maybe that's just my perspective. So,
well, let's also fill in the viewers in terms of, because where this interview is coming from is me reaching out to you and saying, you know, James, what do you think of this? You know, here's the video, and like I said, the video, you know, has a fairly polite introduction saying, listen, you know, this is just part of a series of you know, dialect mechanics that apply to all my videos, and you know, I don't want to encourage any stereotypes, etc., and so forth. And then I launch into the mechanics, and then you saw the video, and what was your reaction to the video?